like, I mean, this is the best thing I've ever experienced. That's point blank.
Beyond the Ghostlight.
Hello, and welcome to Beyond the Ghostlight, very first episode. Hello. So, obviously, we're all going through changes, as you can see. A little inconvenient, but there we are. My name's Nick Rowley, and one of those changes, of which I am writhing with delight to tell you about, is the founding of the Ibis Theatre Company, of which Beyond the Ghostlight is one of our things. And I'm here with Luna.
Hello! Thanks, Nick, and hello, all of you tots and terrors. It is absolutely diabolical to see all of you today on this fine day of our Lord in the sunshine. We're so thrilled to be on for the first time, to welcome all of you. And I think I'm not the only one who feels that way. Tori?
Hi, everyone. My name is Victoria Rose Weatherspoon, and I am just horribly happy to be here.
So, aside from those terrible intro lines that we were all throwing out there, we actually have some things here. We have some guests, and we have Michael and Josie, who are the creators and stars, along with several other talented Michigan folks, of Call of the Void podcast. You want to tell us a little more about that, Luna?
Sure thing, guys.
Hey!
Hey, and there they are. So now we can talk about them.
We can talk about
And we can watch their faces.
Our ears were burning. Yep, our ears were burning. We knew.
I love it. Or we could just talk about them like they're not here. That's always delightfully uncomfortable.
I mean, that's fun. That's always fun. So,
or
yeah.
that's them. Hi, Michael Allen Herman, Josie.
Hey!
Hilinski. It's so good to have you guys on.
It's so good to be here. Thank you for having us.
Woo! So one thing that I know I wanted to mention before we get too far along, and I'd love to hear you guys just introduce yourselves a little bit, but one of the projects that you both have been working on that we absolutely died for was the Call of the Wild podcast. This is an excellent podcast. It's if you love eldritch horror, Lovecraftian, anything. If you love New Orleans and the rich, vast wealth of horror and supernatural fiction that's from there, you are going to absolutely love this match made in heaven. It's Call of the Void. It's a new podcast, and I believe just won a couple of awards. Do you guys want to take it from there and tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Absolutely, yeah. So, just like what you're saying there, it's a cosmic horror podcast that we created, and we did just win an award. We won at the Here Now Festival, which is a big audio drama festival that happens every year, and we actually took second place for the Audience Choice Award, which is really super cool. The people who won the first is a podcast called We're Alive, and they've been going on since literally 2009. They have millions and millions of followers. They're the one zombie one. If anyone knows Audio Space, they're like that one zombie chase one.
Full podcast. So similar in structure to ours, but huge. They've been going for years. So
they've been going for a long time. Absolutely, yeah. But I guess how did it start? So we were listening to some audio dramas. Rabbits, that was a big one that Josie and I were listening to. We loved the show Rabbits, and it's so cool to tell like basically a television show, but in the audio space, right? So you're hearing the whole soundscape. So cool. And we started thinking about how can we use this medium? How can we harness these skills and really like use this and utilize this? And that's where.
Yeah. And then the second part of the inspiration was we just visited New Orleans, kind of out of the blue. And we thought, like, oh my gosh, we love this. And it was around the same time when we started listening and reading some of Lovecraft on our own. So we kind of just like melded right away. We sort of melded Lovecraft with New Orleans, and just kind of like from there we're like, let's make a podcast.
Right. Yeah. And it was perfect. The setting of New Orleans, it was crazy. You're so right. We just went down there because tickets are really cheap, and we discovered that we actually were flying down in a hurricane. It was hurricane season, right? And we flew down, and we landed, and there was a news in the airport, and they were saying like, yeah, there's a hurricane watch, and we were like, wait a second though. And the Uber who got us to the French district, we were like, are we okay? Like, is it gonna be a hurricane now? Are we gonna die? And she's like, buy some extra groceries, you'll be fine. Don't even worry about it. They're so chill with doom over there in New Orleans. It's so cool. Yeah, they're awesome.
Chill with doom. I think that I want to put that on a t-shirt.
Right.
Chill with doom. And I think that's a really interesting point. About, just when you go, you fall in love with the city, right? Like Tori, Nick, I'm sure we could relate.
I love New Orleans. It reminds me in many ways of Detroit. There are certain. It's not exactly like Detroit, but there are certain similarities. They're both built on a delta. They have this sort of post-industrial thing going on. They're both very much associated with water and liminality. So, yeah, I love it.
Yeah, and that's where you guys are. You guys are building this incredible theater, this incredible community in the Detroit area.
We are. Thank you for shouting us out. We appreciate that. Yes, we, the Ibis, we are in the other Delta at Detroit. So, which is very exciting to be your new neighborhood theater of shadows.
And that's your brand. You guys are that theater of shadows. You're going to have that horror and that spooky vibe there. That's so cool. Yeah, I love that.
Absolutely. And we love that you guys are playing with new ways of envisioning theater. You said it. It's kind of like a televised, an audible television show. And you guys did this all together without a sound engineer, I believe. The two of you guys and the Audacity sound program. Can you tell us about that? And this was during quarantine, right? You guys were working on this together?
It actually was before quarantine. So,
gotcha.
It wasn't until we actually released our final episode, and then that's kind of when all hell broke loose. So,
Wow.
But you're right. So we divided it amongst the two of us. We were the two people that were rocking the show, and we divided the hats among the two of us. So Josie was absolutely incredible with the directing, and the whole reason that the actors are very talented too, but she was that creative brain that really brought this thing to life, which was really cool. We both worked on the writing. I think I did the first draft of the writing, but then she was right there to polish it up and make the dialogue sharp.
Yeah. Even before working on the script, I mean, we did a lot of work on the story development. We outlined every episode and had all the details before we even started with dialogue. We kind of had the entire structure of season 1.
Yeah. Which is what we're doing. Oh, sorry. What were you saying?
No, I was just going to say, so you started with the structure and kind of built out from there.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's kind of I feel like all art forms are similar in this. You kind of have to build the skeleton before you put on the muscles and the skin and the clothing. First, you kind of have to have that skeleton.
Oh, yeah. Familiar. Yeah.
Right. And so for that skeleton, I think we just reached into some sort of spooky things. The idea of the void. Well, so we saw Lovecraft. We read some of those classics like Color Out of Space and Cthulhu, and what are some other ones we read? We read Mounds of Madness, just a bunch of classics, a bunch of those called Cthulhu classics, and we were like, this is cool, and we love the idea of the horror from the unknown, but this can be updated. This can be brought to a new level and a new way, and we were trying to think, what's the best way to do that, And we started thinking about a lot about the void at the same time too. We were like, the void is a horrifying thing. You know what I mean? It's just a really haunting, hungry force that exists, and it's everywhere. There's you feel the void in all kinds of places, and we were like, that could be interesting. That could be a personification, and that's where a bit of our creature magic started to happen for that. But then there's a lot of other building out of structure that happened on top of it.
Absolutely. Did you get the chance to see Annihilation, or have you read the Southern Reach books? Because There's something about the South and weird fiction still resonating, I think, and that's
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nick, I totally agree, man. There's something truly, it's like that Southern Gothic. It's that different tempo, it's those isolated communities, those places that have been around like in like an almost an ancient sort of way. They've been around. There's something there. There's something growing. It's true. It's truly chilling. Yeah, there's a magic there. Absolutely.
Well, we love it. And thank you so much for unleashing all this horror on the world after your last podcast. We can't thank you enough. It's just been simply awful, and we love it. So, kind of with that, we appreciate Lovecraft a lot here, and we're all looking forward very much to seeing Lovecraft Country in August from the brains of, I believe, Jordan Peele and Guillermo del Toro.
And J.J. Abrams.
J.J. Abrams as well.
J.J. Abrams, yeah. He's the other one behind that, yeah.
Fantastic.
Really cool. Based on a book property, right? So it's a book originally, and I don't know the author, Edward Lives, so I don't know who it is, but incredible story. You're right, and they really spin some of those deeply misogynistic and racist moments inside Lovecraft, and they make them. It's aware of that, and it sort of spins it on its head in a really beautiful way. It totally reinvents that sort of world of like Lovecraft. Yeah.
And you know what? And that's a great point. Let me ask you about that, because as someone who, it sounds like you guys did a deep dive into Lovecraft after your New Orleans trip, and being an adult and reading Lovecraft, sometimes we encounter him in high school, or he's one of our first ventures into the void, if you will. Right. And then you learn what a problematic author, what a terrible and racist, bigoted human being he was.
My God. Even for his time. Normal racists were like, wow, Howie.
Yeah, you gotta chill, bro.
A bit much.
So a man who's literally terrified of his own shadow and every other unknown or unlike him that's out there. What was that like, doing this research, processing that material, and then thinking of a new way of exploring this story?
Yeah. Well, I'd have to say an interesting thing happened with Lovecraft, because kind of Lovecraft himself created all these stories, which are, despite him, despite like all of his viewpoints and everything, they are really quite beautiful and poetic stories, right? And kind of what happened there is that it kind of created this culture where people did spin-offs and like their own, people kind of took these stories and made kind of a Lovecraftian society and more literature that was also kind of part of Lovecraft. So I kind of like to think of it as being like the legacy of Lovecraft is bigger and stronger and more beautiful than the man Lovecraft. And so that's kind of how we sort of approached it, and kind of thought like we're inspired by his fears of the unknown, his fears of the universe, and but we don't let that kind of limit us to his all of the bigotry, all of the racism, all of these things. Right. Really outdated and not part of what the stories that we want to tell.
Yeah. Right, because that concept of the horror of the unknown, that does translate, right? And it should, we think, should be updated with the times, and it should, how does this generation feel what the unknown is, and why are they scared of that? What's the true horror for them there?
Yeah, I think that's actually why I think Lovecraft hangs around. Well, for two reasons. One, I think because his grasp of language and atmosphere are really good. Like he loves playing with language, and he loves doing the atmospherics of horror. And the other thing is learning that what you thought was a solid foundation is in fact actually a complete lie, and the truth is so much deeper, so much weirder.
Yeah.
And saying that, like, that's the oldest fear, the fear of the unknown, that is an absolute truth, and I think that remains compelling.
Yeah, I
I
completely
love
agree.
that, you guys. That you're talking about an evolution of a person's legacy of and the legacy of their fear. I think that's fantastic. Really interesting.
Yeah, it's more of an adjective now. I mean, Lovecraftian, you can like slap that label on things and say that this has like aspects of Lovecraftian horror in it, versus just saying that it is like a single author's work. Yeah.
Sure. So, go ahead, Tori.
Oh, I was just going to say, I find it very interesting that we're talking about that with the topic that you guys chose to talk about in this podcast, right? You guys talked about sensory deprivation quite a bit.
Yeah.
It's like, so the idea of fear of the unknown and updating that in a time where there's very, very little that is unknown or even unknowable. Even if you don't know it, you can find it. So it was very interesting for me to see an exploration of sensory deprivation where the knowledge and the information and the thing that will fix you from the void is possibly right here, but you don't have access to it because you don't have the senses to see it. So that really touched me. So can I ask, I guess my question is, what made you choose sensory deprivation as a topic, as something to write about?
Great question. Very good question, Tori. Yeah. Man, I'm trying to think about whose idea it was between the two of us, sweetie. I think I can't remember, but I remember we were thinking that there's something scary about becoming like emptier and emptier, right? And at least our society certainly feels that way, that if we're losing stuff, that that's like we're becoming like lesser or something like that. And that's horrific. I mean, that's a truly horrific thought. And to live in that space and to sort of explore that and to explore how society feels about that and to see how some of the characters feel about that too was very, very interesting, you know? And so I think that's where the root of the idea did come from. It was that they have like less and less, they're being pulled away until they are like hollow themselves. They are just like the void, you know, they're just completely.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the void itself is almost like, it's a metaphor for losing your identity, like losing everything that you are and everything that makes you unique. So, and kind of what we sort of decided was that, like, this is a gradual process, and in some ways, I feel like that sometimes that happens in a less dramatic and scary way, but you know, we kind of we lose ourselves, we lose our identities because of, I don't know, other issues in our life where we hide ourselves or whatever it is. Sometimes there's this gradual process of losing who you really truly are. So I think we kind of embodied this in a very physical way of like, you know, everything they're losing their senses. They're also losing their memory. They're losing their ability to communicate with each other until finally they're just a completely empty shell.
And it's just so intriguing and interesting. And I don't know if you guys intended it this way, but the parallels of that fear and that thing happening with the socioeconomic structure that we have, of this idea of like losing yourself and losing everything that makes you who you are. Like, what does that mean for an individual? You know, it could be different to each person. It's a very complex story you guys created.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Also, was it intentional? Oh, I'm so sorry. Was it intentional that the eyesight was the first thing to go while we're all listening to a podcast? Because I thought that was
yes. Absolutely. Yeah. So one of the things we were very, very passionate about was using the audio space appropriately when we do a show like this, because it was intended from the very beginning to be an audio show. Sometimes people will adapt like a film for audio and see if they can get like audience and see if they can, like, you know, build up like a following that way. But we weren't thinking that way. We thought the best thing to do was to build audio from the floor up. So there's all these moments. That's definitely one of them. Using like loss of sight is definitely one of the first things that is that way. But even in some of the dialogue, we would have it in ways that would make the listener have a little cosmic horror moment. They'd say like, what is that? Do you see that over there? And now you in your brain starts to just spiral, right? You just like, what are they seeing? What's going on? I don't understand. And you're starting to think about what could possibly be over there. And we were doing that very, very intentionally to give that cosmic horror sensation, even in the dialogue. So as frequently as we possibly could. Yeah.
So related to that, though, the gradual loss of faculties and the fact that it is sort of multi-spread brings up a lot of things that we're seeing with the actual reason why we're all on lockdown. And what it reminded me of is Charlie Brooker when he was creating Black Mirror. His very first episode is an episode called The National Anthem, in which the Prime Minister has to do an incredibly intimate act in a deeply humiliating way.
Yeah.
Okay. And then maybe a year later, it turned out that the current Prime Minister had done pretty much that same thing in college. And so I wonder, how does that feel to have written something that then there are real world parallels? And they're not just like minor parallels, they're sort of very pronounced parallels. So you have this, now your pandemic is essentially one caused by supernatural or otherworldly things rather than a virus. But there is a similarity in that. And how does that feel? What's that like?
Well, I think one of our listeners posted it on Twitter one time, like right after we finished the final episode. And I think this was my favorite comment that I've ever gotten. They said, okay, do you all think it's a coincidence that Call of the Void ends and then the world goes batshit crazy? I don't think so. So I don't know. It is it's funny a little bit, but in a kind of I mean it's I'm happy that it's relevant, but I'm not happy about the current situation of the world, if that makes sense.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. It is weird. Yeah. And once again, we did write this about a year, the first season at least. We wrote it about a year ago. So I promise we didn't know. But it is weird. There was a really strange parallel in that, you know. Yeah, it's just kind of bizarre. And you're right. You don't really know. You're left to this. It's like art imitate life, life imitate art. You don't really know where it ends or begins. It kind of spins on its head. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. And the other thing that struck me about I'm trying to do it without spoilers because I noticed someone note saying that there is
no spoilers.
So I did psychology at university, and one of the big things is operant conditioning with B.F. Skinner. He's the guy who created the boxes that you see, you put a rat in and it hits a button, gets a treat. Well, Skinner raised his daughter in one of these boxes. And there is a certain parallel that I see in the story to what Skinner did. And I don't know whether you were aware of what Skinner did, but I found that really interesting to listen to, knowing that story and the way in which sometimes scientists experiment with unethically with those closest to them because, well, there they are.
Yeah, right. I'm trying to dance around the spoilers as well. Yeah, sweetie, do you remember where I was not aware of that Skinner thing that you guys are talking about there? But do you remember where that plot came from? I don't remember where.
I mean, I think we liked the idea for whatever reason. I don't know. I don't know what inspired it exactly, but we kind of just thought of we liked claustrophobia in relationships and in problems. So we liked the idea that sometimes the people that hurt us the most are the people that are supposed to give us the most support in the most.
Right.
So and that happens in life, and it's I mean, sometimes it happens in life to varying degrees, but it is always such a hard thing when somebody who is related to you or very, very close to you hurts you in such a deep way that it really, really affects the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but then in the same character, absolutely, sweet. I totally agree. We didn't want that character to be a victim either.
No.
That was also something that we were passionate about. And that's a difficult subject. That's a difficult line to ride because we don't want broken people, but we do want people who have had problems, but
scars, I think.
Scars, yeah.
Characters with scars who kind of realize that they have those scars and are strong enough to to grow from
Yeah.
that.
Because we do like dark subject matter. Absolutely. We do love horror. We love all that stuff, but we are still optimistic artists, I think, when it comes like at the end of the day. And we do love stories that inspire as much as haunt, you know?
Yeah. I think haunting as well as giving hope is kind of
Yeah. Oh, yeah, there it is. Haunt and hope. Literally.
Haunting and hope. You guys are coming up with the best t-shirts today. It's fantastic for all of our merch. Hopeful hauntings. I actually want to keep talking about that line of thought just for a moment, because we're kind of on the same boat that, yes, you know, there's a wealth of the genre out there, right? And there are so many terrible slasher films that you can watch and you'll enjoy maybe. And, you know, depending on how bad it really is. And,
right.
And usually you walk away with a feeling, you know, you get a good jump scare in or something. There's that dread, but it doesn't go anywhere. You know, it's very different as a theatrical experience or an entertainment experience, because you're scared, you get the adrenaline rush, and then, you know, you go make out with your date or what have you.
Right. Yeah.
But we often find that, at least in this creative coven, that the most interesting horror stories have that glimmer of light to it, that there is a real fine line, and usually the best horror stories have some comedy to them.
Yeah.
Frankly, you know, they make you laugh while you're waiting for the thing to go out and jump at you from underneath the bed. So can you guys talk a little bit more about that? What is it, you know, what are some of your favorite examples maybe of horror that really draws that line for you?
Yeah. Well, one thing just to comment on, I mean, that's something I've been saying for years. Is like, if you want people to be really scared, give them a reason to care about these characters, and give them, you know, like if you line up comedy with horror, I mean, it just like when you line up opposite colors, it makes both colors more vibrant. So, yeah, that's just something I'm super passionate about, mixing those genres, comedy, horror, you know, romance, whatever, mix them all together in a beautiful conglomeration.
I mean, we were totally talking before this about Young Frankenstein and Rocky Horror. And how they're fun in that way, and they bring something to it.
Yeah. I think if I had to like summarize my entire, this is going to be a little pretentious, so bear with me while I go down the pretentious train. If I was going to summarize my entire undergraduate like theater experience, I would say that like learning that variety and art are like so integral to each other. That's amazing. Once you've established something on stage, now it's time for something else. We need to show that variety in the craft, in the writing, in the acting. That's what makes you more dynamic. That's what really makes profound art, I believe. So if I was going to like give a note to like young actors, I would just say like, keep an eye on your variety. There needs to be diversity. There needs to be a variety of things going on stage, you know?
Yeah. Well, shout out to that super pretentious EMU theater training that we love and admire so much.
Right.
And speaking of that, actually gives me a really great opportunity to segue. You guys, we've actually both had a fellow professor, dear friend, and you know, a playwright in the area, Joe Zettelmeyer. And he worked on, hey, Josie, if you're watching, we love you, man. But Joe went ahead and worked on a version of Jekyll and Hyde that I think you did a couple years ago. And I was kind of curious about it because Corey and I, nope, wrong way. Corey and I have also worked on a version of Jekyll and Hyde. And so, you know, while we're talking about duality and light and comedy, or, well, there's not much comedy in that one, but light and darkness in the same show. Yeah, talk to us a little bit about Jekyll and Hyde. You know, what was that like, kind of putting that together, a new interpretation of a Victorian story that we know pretty well?
Absolutely. Great question. Oh, really good question. Jekyll and Hyde is a funny little novel because when you say Jekyll and Hyde, people know Jekyll and Hyde, of course. Oh, there's Jekyll, there's Hyde. But in the book, that was the reveal. The reveal, like the last paragraph, like the last chapter is they were the same person. Oh, and there's this truly horrific.
Spoilers.
Spoilers. Oh, spoilers for the Victorian. Spoilers. So you have to move past that. I mean, you can't do a straight adaptation or everyone would go, yeah, we called that. We go in to see the show. It's called Jekyll and Hyde, you know. So what was so cool about this theater production is it really ran it really said like, okay, we know this. We know that Jekyll and Hyde are the same person. Now let's explore as much as we can on the human side of who these people are and what's going on. So there was some really cool stuff with the character of Hyde that was done there. And Josie played this incredible character, Elizabeth, who was this love interest for Hyde, but there was a different relationship with Jekyll. It was very, very interesting. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Josie, please. It was so refreshing to see a woman in a Robert Louis Stevenson play.
Yeah.
Right. Shocker. That was really interesting because she has this love relationship with Hyde, who arguably it's not a healthy relationship that she's in. But Joe Zettelmeyer, the director, gave me a note one time, or gave us, me and Dan Johnson, the amazing. So most of my work was with Dan Johnson. Most of my
talented.
We all love Dan. Yeah.
Dan Johnson, love that man. Love him.
Amazing. So most of my scenes were with him, and Joe gave us this note. For Elizabeth, this is not by any means a healthy relationship, but it's the best thing that she's ever experienced. And that kind of stuck with me because, like, sometimes it's like, you don't, I mean, even if it's bad, even if this guy is kind of treating you like trash and being abusive to you and knocking you down for whatever reason, it's like sometimes you just don't see that because it's you have never experienced anything better than that, and you feel something, you feel love, and so it's like, I don't know, I guess this is good, right? And I just thought it was interesting to kind of put myself into that perspective of like kind of not looking at this relationship in a judgmental way, but just being like, I mean, this is the best thing I've ever experienced. That's point blank. This guy's terrible. This guy's a murderer. This guy, is just, I don't know. He's kind of rude to me and stuff. But at the same time, I've never experienced love that's truer or deeper or more satisfying than that. So that's that.
Yeah, absolutely.
How very Victorian. I love it.
Very Victorian. Yeah, right. They did some really cool things. They did some really cool stuff with the actual characters of Hyde too in this convention. Because there were multiple Hydes, and that was spooky because you never really knew who was going to be Hyde. Who was going to pop out with that Hyde energy.
So for anybody who is kind of unaware with it, so Michael played Jekyll, and then I played Elizabeth, and Michael played Jekyll, but then every other character or every other actor played all these a range of different characters, but at some point they played the character of Hyde. So Hyde kind of crept into the show at varying times and could actually do the thing where he's actually talking. Hyde is talking to Jekyll, and Jekyll is talking back, because we kind of know as an audience that is one person. So,
which is really cool to then split out. Like, you're right, totally, sweetie. So you can split out on stage, like, oh, now I'm talking to I'm talking to Hyde, but then I could be talking to two people who are still Hyde. So it could just it split the human person like more and more times, which is so cool. Yeah, so cool to see on stage. But we'd love to hear about your version of Hyde.
We'd love to hear about your play.
Yeah. So how did you guys tackle some of those conventions? What were some cool things you guys did?
Absolutely. Tori, you want to take that one for a hot second? I feel like I've been chatty.
Sure, I can. So what we did was we wanted to explore the reality of humanity with addiction, specifically alcohol addiction. There have actually been quite a number of books and a lot of studies that use the Jekyll and Hyde term, to describe the form the addiction can take for people. And so what we wanted to do was explore the idea that Hyde is actually that voice inside of you that tells you, no, you can't. It's the heart. It's that negativity, which then creates this ability to do things you wouldn't normally do, to be ways that you wouldn't normally be. And then, so we examined that and explored that through the lens of alcoholism. And we did quite a bit of research on that. We spoke with people, we read books, we did interviews. We worked very hard to make it true and honest. And I think we succeeded in that. We actually ended up having people come up to us after performances of it and say specifically that was exactly what it's like. That's what alcoholism is like. We did a very good job of portraying it correctly and not in a caricature way, because that for us is what in the same concept that you, in that particular production of Jekyll and Hyde could be anybody. It's the same thing that we were saying, that Hyde could be anybody. Anybody could have Hyde in them.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's so cool.
Did you guys actually construct the script yourself based off that novella?
We did, yes. And that was a lot of fun to figure out what to take from the novella. Corey and I worked on the script for a long time, collaborated with our actors, all within the incredible Slipstream Theater Initiative community. And one of the early choices that we made was to look at, have Jekyll's eyes be those of a woman's. What is it like to be a professional doctor in the modern world right now with all of the pressures that implies, and then, add on to that you're making 75 cents less, or 75 cents to a dollar, you got boobs, and that our Jekyll was confronting this inner demon that had both done things for her in ways, because that's the other thing too, that Jekyll, that temptation, there is that temptation of Hyde, of that freedom and that charisma and the, that feeling that you can take on a city, that is very attractive for someone going through that trauma of trying to replace their, put their life together with a solid structure. So it was incredible to work on that process. It was a very personal process for all the actors involved, a very honest process. And I think what you guys had said earlier about finding the evolution of an adaptation so that it finds new life in the modern world, I think that one really rang true for us, Tori, on this one, is finding a new way to tell, a story. You're absolutely right, Michael. Like, we all now know the spoiler. So, unless you've been in a crypt for the last 200 years, which, knowing our audience, not judging, it may take a moment to catch up. So we wanted to pursue a different way of looking at this. And I think that was a cool way of going about it.
That's super cool. Can I ask one follow-up question, if you don't mind? Yeah.
Sure.
So then that's some awesome. That's heavy subject matter. That's like a revamp of an adaptation. What was the most difficult part in that creating that story? Was it the adaptation? Was that tricky, or was it like the dense subject matter, or what was some of that? What would you say was like the biggest obstacle that you guys faced in putting that production together? I'm just curious.
Well, that's interesting. So one of the things that we did actually was we would at many times have Jekyll and Hyde on stage at the same time, and I believe we always had Hyde on stage.
Yes.
Never Jekyll was on. We always had Hyde on stage. Hyde was always there. Hyde was always this feeling.
Cool.
So I guess for me, it difficult wouldn't be the word, I guess, to use, but it was a lot to see how the subject matter affected people around me, and affected people who saw the show, and affected people who were working on the show. The subject matter was very dense and was very heavy, so we had to make sure we were very supportive of each other, took care of each other, and made that rehearsal space, depending on the way you want to put it, safe space, supportive space, but a place where we could explore things that could be very personal, or that could be very frightening, or that could be very, you never know what people could be talking about or dealing with. So it was extremely interesting to examine the human psyche with all of us in the same room for something that's so difficult to really understand in this society. Because if you think about it, everywhere you turn, everything you look at, there's alcohol, there's always booze. It's not a taboo. So to look at this as though it were a taboo, and it's this thing that makes Hyde come out, it was very interesting to examine that whole part. So I wouldn't say difficult, I would say interesting.
Yeah, cool.
That's a good point. I think that actually kind of brings me to another thought that I'd love to ask you guys about. But the idea of working with horror, within genre, the horror genre, there's a lot to play with. And I think it's interesting watching, some of these adaptations or evolutions that are steering away from the supernatural aspect of much. I appreciate you guys did that in your piece, in your podcast. And I actually think that's very much in the spirit of Robert Louis Stevenson. You know, all of his characters, it's all based on science. And literally, he's trying to demystify or find a new way of telling these stories. But we still see a lot of ghouls and monsters and horror things like that. But I think it's always the challenge is when the horror is closer to reality. Right? Again, finding the hope in that. And so I guess, you know, with I would love to know, first of all, any future projects you guys are working with, but you can talk a little bit about what that's like when you're playing with that thin line between, you know, this is make believe, but we're touching on some very realistic topics here. Just for you guys working with your script.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, what is some of the I guess the tricks to deal with some of that stuff? I think latching onto the humanity, I think, is a great tool for dealing with some of that stuff. Because you still want people to, you know, to digest the art. You still want people to experience it, enjoy themselves while they're going through the art. And trying to find a good way to like deliver that message and to help people experience that fine edge is really, really important. I think that the genre of horror just in general right now is like doing incredible things. And that's just a tribute to some of the great artists working in horror. I think Get Out is a great example of how horror has been brought to a whole new level because of something like Get Out, where we really explore something that has a deep, profound message, but in genre, right? We're using genre like science fiction or horror to actually deliver like a huge societal message or a deep human message or something like that. And that's really cool. I think that formula is like golden, and it's just like a really cool. It's like, you know, there's so many ways you can play with that, right? It's just a puzzle. You can put in all these different colors and all these different messages, and you can play with it, and it's fun. You know, it's like Tetris. You can just do all kinds of cool stuff with that genre, and I think that's where horror should be right now. I think that's where we can keep pushing that envelope and keep pushing that forward. You know, yeah, I think so. I think that's probably one of the at least that feels right to me. I don't know. There's probably other schools of thought that think other ways about that too. You know.
So that brings up something as well. So where do you go from here? Now, both with the show, we know if people go to the website, you know, you can see there's the little notice that the second season is coming in next year. So obviously you have plans there. And so my question, I guess, is has two sides to it. One, spoiler free. Where are your thoughts sort of, you know, hovering around when it comes to specifically that new season? But also, where do you take horror as a response to what we're currently going through, current events, you know, that kind of thing, both in Call of Void and just in general, in other projects?
Great question. Yeah, really, really good questions. I think there's a couple there, so I'm gonna grab one of them, Sweetie, if you want to grab another one.
Yeah. Well, Call of the Void season 2 is coming out. We're very excited. We're in the process of we kind of, where are we, Sweetie? Like, I think second draft of the whole season. So we kind of have everything planned out, but we're still kind of tweaking little parts here and there. I'm trying to like not be trying to avoid all of it, but I guess I'll say, you know, it was so great to introduce these characters in season 1. So I feel like now, because we kind of have these, we've kind of built who they are and we've established relationships that they have with each other. It's kind of fun to explore sort of the next step in each of their own journeys and how they connect to each other. I think it's darker, and it deals, without spoilers, it deals with another really, really hard, heavy issue that is a little bit was not part of season 1, but it's something that we are including in season 2. It's I don't want to say it's a political issue, but it's a personal human issue that I think is something really hard to talk about, but I think it's worth talking about it.
Yeah.
And what better genre to use to talk about it than horror, you know? I like that.
Right. But yeah, Josie's totally right. It is darker. It's like it's the next evolution of those characters. We really believe in taking characters in directions that we haven't gone yet. If we repeat stuff, I feel like the audience gets bored. At least we would, you know. And so we're always looking for opportunities to take characters and plot lines in ways that we haven't gone yet. And I think that's the way we're going to keep it fresh and keep it, you know, interesting for people. But there was a follow-up question there, which was like the response to like the world that we're in right now and like the COVID world, or which Nick, that was a great question. You know, at different parts of the quarantine, I felt different ways about, you know, how it's affected my art and how it's going to affect my art. But there's been a big boom, obviously, in disease-focused horror shows. We're seeing a lot of that in development right now, which is cool. But I think even more importantly than that, I think that just like stories about human connection, stories about people being isolated and what that feels like are going to become more genuine and more honest because of the result of this. And I think we as artists can really latch on to what that feels like and really empathize with people and tell them that we can get through that and that, you know, it's a temporary phase. And the importance of human connection, the importance of those things, I think is just going to really rise in horror, but I think in a lot of other genres too.
I love that.
So I'm going to take this moment to go ahead and segue into, I have a question for you guys specifically.
Great.
What was the thing that made you fall in love with horror? Like, what was the show or the song or the book or whatever it is, like the thing that you think about and you're like, yep, that's why I love what I do. Right there, that's the thing.
Oh, that's a great question.
Okay, I'm not sure if this was the original, the first one, but it's the one that comes to mind right now. Is the show Penny Dreadful, with like John Logan's Penny Dreadful series.
Okay.
I started watching that, and I was just like, oh man, these monsters are beautiful. They're just so rich, and like particularly John Clare or Frankenstein's monster, and that is such a beautiful human experience and so poetic. It's like it juxtaposes poetry and like horror and ugliness and sadness and despair, as well as beauty and hope. And so that's the thing that I always kind of go. That's the show that I always go to that goes like, this show gets it.
Yeah, that's a great show. They do some really profound things in that show. They really do. I think probably one of my first experiences with horror is actually way back in the EMU days again. We did an incredible little horror show every year called Dead Gallery. And I love Dead Gallery. In fact, Luna, I think I inherited Dead Gallery from you. It was like your generation was doing incredible things with Dead Gallery. And then it kind of was starting to fizzle out a little bit. And then,
Guys, and you were so enthusiastic and you were just awesome about it. So yeah, and then also to Austin Tracy, my dear love, who is not here right at the moment, but we'll watch this later. He helped us get the Penny Dreadfuls kind of revived after the last generation, or excuse me, yes,
the Dead Gallery. Yeah. And I remember there was this one time, so the first year that I did it, it was hardly a script. It was really just like a mad scientist. It was like a creepy scientist's rooms all across throughout Cork. And the audience would come in, they'd like open a door, somebody would scream, there'd be like intestines on the floor, that kind of thing. And that's what would happen, and the door would close. And I remember I like, they needed people, so I was actually able to work in one of the rooms, and we had this like shtick where like the tour guide got grabbed like part of the journey or whatever. And I remember like we grabbed the tour guide. I think I grabbed one of the tour guides. And I remember like the people that were walking through, they were like, oh no, like she just got. And they like believed it. They like believed that like something had truly horrific had happened. And it was just incredible to see such a visceral reaction so fast, right? And I think that might have been one of the moments where I was like, ooh, okay, there's something really magic about horror. There's something really special about people experiencing something, and they react in such an honest and visceral way. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that
kind of reminds me of one of the things that Luna and I were talking about that probably drove us on to become the Ibis, is when we were talking about doing Dreams in the Witch House, like an adaptation of Dreams in the Witch House, which I don't know how many Lovecraft things you read and whether you read that, but that's one, if you didn't get around to, is one of his, it's a really superb one to check out.
Okay,
And
yeah, I haven't read that
listening-
one yet. So I will. That sounds like a great one to read.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. And you were talking about them. So speaking of magic, I wanted to just point out really quickly. You two are so perfectly dressed and coordinated. We told you to dress up and you came as the dark bride and groom. I love that. Because will you also just tell me, for my own jealous ears, just how wonderful is it to be planning your wedding during a plague?
Oh man. Well,
why doesn't everybody do this? Why doesn't
Why
everybody?
not?
it's very chic. Yeah, everyone should do it.
It's coming, right? You guys are that's later on the summer, right?
Very soon.
Oh, it's next weekend.
Yes, very soon.
Coming
Yeah.
Saturday.
We're so deep.
I did not know that. Special thanks for taking time out to have this interview with us a week
Absolutely.
later, you guys. Thank you.
Absolutely. But planning in a quarantine is basically like planning a wedding twice. And I am going to say Josie is the ringleader here. She is like the master behind the whole operation. She's done incredible stuff. She's had to plan many things multiple times because we had an original date that was just earlier on in the quarantine, and there could not have been anything back when we had like gatherings of like 5 or less, we just had to just not do it then and decide to shift it to a later date, which just meant doing everything again, do everything twice, which was a lot. And she never complained once. She's a superhero, honestly. She's the best. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's in a certain way, kind of having that experience of planning like your dream wedding and then kind of having this pandemic ruin that all, then like, okay, plan B kind of thing. It kind of makes you, in some ways, I'm more excited than I would have been about the wedding day, because it's sort of like, I kind of had this process where I didn't even know if we were going to, I mean, I knew we were going to get married, but I didn't know if I was going to be able to, like, am I going to be able to wear my wedding dress down the aisle? Like, are we going to be able to have anybody there? And now that we can at least do that, it's really quite magical. And I'm just really thankful. I love this guy so much. At the end of the day, I'm just so happy that we're getting married. Like,
yeah, me too. I think it's a very healthy way of just like life, but on art as well. Like adapting with what you're given is great. You can get really bitter and you can get sad about what's going on, or you can say, okay, this is what we got, and we're going to make it just as incredible as we possibly can, given these parameters.
Can I? Okay, I'm so glad you said that, because right. So I feel like the three of us have this very unspoken understanding that we believe that some of the best art can come from when you got to figure it out.
yeah.
You have $100,000 in your pocket. You can electronic everything, but when you have to figure out how to make this thing actually be scary or actually work,
Yeah.
best art comes, man. You have
And even doing it together. I love that you guys are creative partners in so many ways. And then there's the wedding on top of that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Very cool.
But we have so much respect for you guys to think that way too, to just, make it work with what you have. I think that's the way it goes. I don't think that there ever is a mystery budget that just trickles down and you're given $1 billion to work with. I think that you are intelligent with the budget that you have, and then you slowly get bigger and bigger, but you're still grateful for thinking small like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And for us as a Theater of Shadows company, I think that's part of the cool, gooey part of it, right? Like the dark corners, the cobwebs, we made this happen with 5 cents and a tin can kind of thing, like that really lends itself to just the air of what we're doing. And not just this, but also theater of the oppressed and theater for the people. If you have $100,000 budget, if you have this huge budget and you make these things that are inaccessible for people who are coming to watch, then it's just like, oh, pretty light, pretty, they got a really nice set, but what are you saying? Am I part of this? Am I invested? Do I care? Yeah. Whereas when you have to work with what you have, you care as an audience member because you feel like closer to it. You feel connected to it,
Yeah. Absolutely. Every word you said, yes, I completely agree. Yeah.
All great. Last couple minutes here, guys, and I just wanted to take a moment. First of all, we love all of the fabulous Michigan actors that y'all put in your podcast. So huge shout outs to everybody, and also Dan Johnson. We already did that earlier, though. But anything else that we should keep on the lookout for you coming from you guys next? We'll definitely keep our eyes open for season 2. Anything else that you guys are working on, or somebody you want to shout out, right now creatively?
Yeah. Oh man. Well, I want to echo that. The Michigan theater actors, we used all Michigan talent for Call the Void, and they're incredible. I think it's tribute to how incredible the Michigan market is. That constantly, over and over again, people in reviews say those actors were incredible, those performances were incredible, and that's just because Josie got them in the room, and then they were talking together, and there was just this magic that would happen between these characters, and they're incredible. It's such an it's a mecca of good theater artists that exists right in this.
Not only are they fabulous actors, they're also just our friends. They're also people we just adore and love working with. And I always say this, like, yes, you can be talented, but like I don't know, I have to want to work with you in order for me to cast you.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, just a shout out to them for both being incredible actors, but also just being incredible people, just incredible people.
Absolutely, yeah. So they're all just really, really talented people that we've worked with in some like Great Penny Dreadful shows. I mean, we're talking Dan Johnson, we're talking Joe Zettelmeyer, we're talking Julia Garlott. There's so many of them. You can't even list them all because there's just so many like people that we absolutely love and love working with. But future projects, yeah. I mean, Call of Void season 2. That's definitely a big project we got going on right now. That's happening. Early next year is when we're slated to do that. And once again, it's all written. We're polishing. We are working forward with some of that stuff. So that's all great. What other things are on the horizon? We love the many different facets of art, and we never like to just stick into one little pigeonhole. So we're doing audio now, which we love, and we're addicted to it. But we've done theater shows in the past. The two of us have. We've written and created our own shows too. So we're very interested in creating our own theater in the future. There's very beginning whispers of creating our own film as well. That's something that we are very passionate as well. So these are all projects that are moving forward, and we'll be sure to blast all that out on social media when that stuff starts to happen.
Oh, and Michael's play Chasing Clouds it was supposed to be this year, but they moved it, and with the Rest About Theater, they moved it to next year.
Theater shoot.
Right.
So that Michael has written
right.
Wonderful show.
We can't wait to see that one. We love our folks at the Rousties too. So can't wait to see you guys on stage again soon.
What about you guys? You guys have an incredible theater show going on. What's new? What's happening for you guys in the next bit here?
Oh, should we tell? Dare we?
Oh, can you?
Yeah, I believe we're at a point where we can actually sort of say that. Yeah.
So we can reveal perhaps our next coming show. We have a fantastically talented cast coming together, and we are still pulling together the last couple people for it. So we'll be making a special audition announcements next week for Detroit actresses within the area. We are very excited about this show. We are doing a production adaptation of an old favorite of ours, No Exit. That we went ahead and retitled for the 21st century.
Inspired by my inner lawyer says it is inspired by.
Very good. Not an adaptation. It is very loosely inspired by No Exit. And We Closed will be premiering online as an entirely virtual play that we will soon be making available to the public after our production as well, so that others can also use this and use this format. We love to see and hopefully it will inspire other online shows or other ways for actors to start working right now in this virtual space. So
I think that's genius subject matter. I mean, in a time where we are trapped, in boxes, that's so clever. You guys are already off to an amazing start. That sounds so cool.
Like you planned it or something. It's weird.
Yeah. Well, you guys are literally the perfect example of where theater is going next. It's the perfect both in a logistical like how are we actually going to get this to an audience, but also those themes and those like the stories that you're actually telling. I mean, that's where theater is going. It's you guys are doing awesome.
Yeah, that's so
Thanks,
cool.
guys. Means a lot coming from y'all. Oh, we'll have more details about all that kind of jazz later, certainly coming out this week. But I just wanted to thank you from the bottom of my heart, guys. I know it's been a crazy busy week. So just having you sit down, put on some makeup, put on some fun, and chat with us about all the things that go bump in the night and the things that we all love. It's been really a pleasure. So thank you again, both.
Likewise, you guys are a treat. Thank you for this. So wonderful.
While we're saying thank yous to you guys, I'd also like to thank everybody who has been watching, even if you've been watching from the beginning or you just showed up. Particularly, I'd like to do a couple shout outs. We've got Gappa who was here. We want to say thank you.
Hey, Mama Bridget, we love you.
And Chrissy Becker, thank you for tuning in. And
we love Chrissy. Oh,
thank you for signing in. Thank you guys for showing up, for joining us for this. We're going to have another one next month for Sunday of every month. And please like, follow, share, and comment. I don't know if you're here if you don't comment. And if you want me to say your cool name so everybody can hear it, go ahead and let me know that you're here.
Can I give a shout out to Jason Such, because we love that man.
Oh, Jason Such. We love Jason Such. He has been a fan for Call the Void from day one, before we even had content. He's an incredible man. He supported us tremendously. Jason's the best. We love you, Jason. You're awesome, man.
Jason.
Thank you, Jason.
You're fantastic.
Jason.
Love, do you see what happens when you're a really great, devoted fan? Look at
And I'd like to do one more shout out to everyone who has been helping us so far, getting the IBIS up and running. Particularly, I want to shout out to Aku Kadogo and to Eric Swanson for helping me learn some stuff. So thank you guys so much. Everybody who has been involved so far and everybody who will be involved in the future.
Yeah, and I'd also like to say we'll also do a shout out to Sarah Lucas, because Sarah Lucas.
We love you, and we miss you, Sarah Lucas.
Yeah, you want to pick up on that, Luna?
Absolutely. Just giving some love out to Sarah Lucas, one of our founding members, who currently has been just recuperating, in New Mexico. But we have some incredible projects coming from her and from her very unique viewpoint, and truly her vision, love of all things vampire and all things crocodile and gator related is funny enough a lot of what has gone into making this happen. So we love you, Sarah. We'll talk soon. Cheers, babe. So I think that's everybody for our last announcement. We will see all of you fine monsters and mollies next month. I believe that will be August 2nd. So we'll see you all back here in our dark diabolical space. And again to our guests for joining us.
Thank you again. We'll see you guys soon.
Bye, guys. And goodbye to everyone out there on the interweb.
Beyond the Ghostlight.